Hello all, so I'm back again to talk about MBTI, Myers-Briggs personality types. So in my recent research on the personality type theory, I've come across a few articles that are rather critical and scathing about MBTI as a personality type theory, along the lines of how it doesn't work and why it's flawed and all these kind of things. I'll put the links to some of the articles in the description of the video. A couple of things that these articles have in common is that the writer of the article seems to have a very, very poor understanding of MBTI. So what I wanted to do is to make a video with 5 points explaining why their criticism is wrong and educate people really on why MBTI works, or at least why it isn't wrong for the reasons that critics often cite. So first of all, MBTI, even though it's popularly called a personality type, is not a personality type. Okay, it's a preference type. I don't see how you could possibly define and measure the unique personality that each very complex person has. So I just think that's completely impractical. So what MBTI does is it takes the cognitive function theory from Carl Jung, and it creates 16 archetypes, which are your 16 personality types, and then gets you to take a test, and that will match your personality based on the results of the test to the closest to the 16 archetypes. But basically, it's really not even describing your personality, it's describing your preferred way of perceiving and judging just a couple of two very important core cognitive functions, which can form the framework of a personality. But two people of the same personality type can have very different personalities, because personality is a lot more than the preferences for these cognitive functions that MBTI covers. So secondly, the usefulness of MBTI is not your four-letter code of your personality type, which one you are. I think the most valuable thing about the whole theory is the underlying theory itself, is the model of Carl Jung's cognitive functions. Because what the model does is that it compares and contrasts different ways of perceiving and different ways of judging. And it then puts them to different combinations, and the model basically shows how people use different ways to judge and perceive, and how they rate those methods as having more importance or not. And so it's a very good model to show how people think differently about two very core functions. So it's very good from a model point of view, in order for you to contrast, compare how people are different, and why they have different values or perceive things differently. But it's far less useful when you try and use your personality type as a deep dive to understand your personality better. The more detailed, the further down you try to go with your personality in relation to your archetype, which is one of the 16 types, the less valuable the model becomes. So it's very good as a helicopter view to say, well, all people of this particular type in general are like this, compared to all people of another particular personality type. But as soon as you start trying to use it to understand your own personality individually, it loses its value. Thirdly, another common criticism of MBTI is the lack of quality or quantity of empirical evidence. Now, I haven't looked into this myself. I'm an ENFP, so we're not very good at sensory data. We're more focused on the theory. But look, I'll take this criticism at face value. Maybe there isn't good enough data there from a scientific point of view to back it up. But again, this is a valid criticism. But surely one of the reasons for this is the difficulty in obtaining such data and obtaining quality data. Because how do you measure somebody's personality? If somebody takes a test, how do we know that what they're answering is correct? And maybe they're feeling a particular way and they answer the test that way. And that leads me on to the fourth thing, is that, again, another criticism is of the test itself. And again, the test isn't scientific and people can answer it differently. Again, I completely agree. The point of MBTI is not the test. The test may or may not be accurate. or not. Um, the point of MBTI, the valuable part of it, is the theory, the underlying theory. And really, if you do not understand the cognitive functions and Jung's theories around the cognitive functions, then you can't really understand MBTI properly, and you have no point criticizing it. Okay, because what MBTI does is it takes Carl Jung's cognitive functions and it simplifies them. It puts them in a very simple, easy to understand packaged form that allows people to understand quickly what their cognitive functions are, how they work, and how it works for other people, and how those different types of combinations compare. That's what MBTI is doing. So to take MBTI at face value and say, well, this is not scientific, is missing the point of MBTI, which is in this deeper theory of the cognitive functions. So you need to learn how that works to understand the true context of your MBTI type and what MBTI means. Finally, the fifth criticism, which is just a ridiculous criticism, but people make it, is people criticizing MBTI again through lack of understanding, because they don't understand what the letters of the type or what the functions mean. And sometimes this is simply due to a linguistic misunderstanding. So people think that thinking and feeling actually means thinking and feeling. No. Thinking in MBTI and feeling in MBTI have very specific meanings laid with context in relation to the theory. Okay, thinking in MBTI is not the same as thinking in the general sense. Neither intuition nor judging. I think those are probably the four most common examples that people completely misunderstand: thinking, feeling, intuition, and judging. But I'm sure there are very many others. So don't be misled into thinking MBTI is ridiculous because you don't understand what those words mean in the context of MBTI. So there you go. Those are my 5 things to watch out for when you're reading about criticism of MBTI. As someone who's studied MBTI for several years now, I would be the first to admit that there are many problems with it, and I can be very critical of MBTI. But please, please, when you write these criticisms, have some idea of what you're talking about. Actually learn about cognitive functions and how they relate back to MBTI and the core foundation of MBTI before you try and criticize it with these false criticisms. It's just embarrassing, honestly. They're often INTJs, which I think says all you need to know.